Winners and losers always emerge when the rulebook shifts, and 2025 is no different. So sit tight and let's find out which positions just stepped into the driver's seat this new season. The new touchback rule. We begin with the flip on kickoffs. Once one of the game's most electric plays, the kickoff had slowly been stripped down for safety reasons until it became, let's be honest, one of the least exciting moments on Sunday. But now, with the NFL's bold new rule, that entire play is getting a facelift, and the ripple effects will be massive. Here's how it works. The kicker still boots the ball from his own 35-yard line, but now the rest of his coverage team is lined up at the opponent's 40. Meanwhile, the return team, minus the returner, is spread out between their 35 and 30-yard line. That means you've got 22 guys standing still, staring each other down, waiting for one man, the returner, to make his move. Nobody can move until the ball either hits the ground or the returner touches it. That tiny adjustment changes everything. Think about the strategy this unlocks. The days of kick it through the end zone and reset at the 25 are numbered. Instead, kickers will have to get precise, aiming for a spot inside the 20 to force real returns. Special teams coordinators, who've been living in a world of boredom, suddenly matter again. And the returner? He's now in the spotlight like never before. One cut, one burst of speed, and he's got open lanes because the coverage team can't build up a 40-yard head of steam anymore. Explosive returners, guys with vision, shiftiness, and breakaway speed, just became game changers. From a fantasy football angle, this is huge. If you're the type who always scrolls past punt return specialists on draft day, you might want to rethink that. Players who double as receivers or running backs and handle kickoffs, their value just spiked. Imagine someone like Devin Duvernay or Kezian Nixon suddenly becoming weekly threats to rack up yards, or even the occasional house call. And don't sleep on kickers here either. Because the league is encouraging more returns, we could see more scoring opportunities overall. Every kickoff could flip field position, keep drives alive, and in turn, boost the point totals across the board. Add to that, coaches now have decisions to make that we've never really seen before. Do you try to pin the returner inside the 10 and trust your coverage unit? Do you mix in short, angled kicks to keep him guessing? Or do you roll the dice and let him run, knowing one mistake could turn into 6 points the other way? It's going to be chaos. Beautiful, strategic chaos. The overtime shakeup building on the energy from the kickoff rule, the NFL didn't stop there. If special teams just got a jolt of relevance, overtime is where the league turned the spotlight directly on fairness, strategy, and high drama. The new overtime rule guarantees that both teams in the regular season will now have a possession, unless, of course, the defense ends things early with a turnover or a score of their own. Under the old modified sudden death rules, the coin toss winner always wanted the ball first. Now, that decision isn't so automatic. Teams have to weigh whether it's better to strike first with their offense or defer and react to what the opponent does. That chess match at the coin toss alone makes overtime instantly more intriguing. On the field, certain positions take center stage. Quarterbacks who thrive in clutch situations, think Mahomes, Burrow, Allen, just became even more valuable. Sustained drives matter more than ever because the 10-minute cap on overtime looms large. Running backs also get a bump, especially those on teams with a ball control identity. A back who can churn the clock, wear down a defense, and keep possession alive is suddenly a premium asset in OT. Wide receivers and tight ends aren't left out either, as teams will still need explosive plays when time is scarce. And on defense, pass rushers and opportunistic corners are gold. One sack or takeaway in overtime now swings momentum in dramatic fashion. From a fantasy football standpoint, this is pure upside. More guaranteed possessions mean more snaps, more yards, more touchdowns. Quarterbacks and running backs stand to benefit the most, but wide receivers in overtime shootouts will pad stat sheets too. Even defenses aren't left out. Holding a team to a field goal in overtime is nearly as impactful as an interception. Yes, ties remain possible under the 10-minute limit, but from a fantasy perspective, the extra opportunities usually mean bigger totals, even if the game ends level. To be honest, it's not just fairer, it's more fun. And just like the kickoff overhaul, it shifts who we value most, both on the field and in our fantasy lineups. Replay assist overtime solved the coin toss controversy, but the NFL's next big rule change tackles a different but equally frustrating issue. Officiating mistakes. For years, fans, coaches, and even players have been left screaming at their TVs or into their headsets because the replay officials' hands were tied. That leash has finally been loosened. The NFL is giving replay assist more authority, expanding its power to intervene on specific black and white fouls. Think face masks, tripping, roughing the kicker, or unnecessary roughness on the quarterback. These are calls that shouldn't be left to endless debate. Either a player grabbed the face mask or they didn't. Either a punter was hit or he wasn't. By focusing on the obvious, the league hopes to strike a balance, fix the game-changing mistakes quickly without bogging games down in endless replays. On the field, this is a win for two of the game's most vulnerable groups, quarterbacks and special teams players. Quarterbacks, already under immense scrutiny with roughing the passer calls, can take comfort knowing a bogus flag won't wipe away a game-changing play. Kickers and punters, often the victims of phantom roughing penalties, benefit just as much. One bad call against a punter can extend a drive, shift momentum, and swing a game. Now, replay can step in to make sure those moments don't come down to human error. For defensive players, there's also relief. No more being wrongly tagged for a personal foul that everyone else knows didn't happen. On the fantasy football angle, this rule doesn't create new points, but it does protect them. Imagine losing a 60-yard touchdown because of a bad face mask call that never actually happened. With replay assist empowered to fix that, those points are preserved. That might sound like a small change, but for fantasy managers, reliability is everything. Knowing that scoring plays are less likely to be erased by an unfixable mistake is a quiet but meaningful upgrade. While it won't solve every gripe, this rule does close the door on some of the most frustrating errors. Kickoffs. The league's decision to change how kickoffs are handled may not dominate headlines like overtime reform, but for the players whose careers hinge on inches, this calls for a party. For decades, kickers and punters have had to use footballs that arrived sealed, untouched, and brand new just hours before kickoff. Unlike the offensive footballs, which are worked in, scuffed, and prepared ahead of time to get a more natural feel, kickoffs were delivered cold and stiff, often slick to the touch. Specialists had no say in their preparation, no ability to break them in, and no margin for error if the ball didn't respond the way they expected. Imagine a quarterback being asked to throw a brand new slippery ball on the game's final drive. Yet that was the reality kickers faced every Sunday. The 2025 change finally evens the playing field. Teams are now allowed to prepare K-balls on the eve of the game, just as they do with offensive footballs. This means specialists can break in the leather, soften it, and get a feel for the ball in practice situations before the lights come on. The league's intent isn't to make kicking easier, it's to make the ball more predictable, ensuring that what decides a game is the kicker's skill, not an artificially introduced variable. For kickers, this change could be the difference between a 50-yard kick sailing wide or splitting the uprights. With a properly prepared ball, the strike point is more reliable, the spin more consistent, and the flight truer. Punters, too, benefit. The drop phase of a punt is delicate, and even the slightest slickness can alter hang time or direction. A prepped ball means more consistent spirals, better placement inside the 10, and more control over field position. In fantasy football, the implications are subtle but meaningful. Kickers should see an uptick in field goal percentage, particularly on longer attempts, which directly translates into more fantasy points. For managers who stream defenses, more consistent punting means field position battles tilt slightly in favor of those DST units, lowering the risk of a disastrous short field. In short, while no one will be redrafting their fantasy board because of K-balls, the position as a whole becomes a little less volatile and a little more trustworthy. It's a seemingly small rule, but one that reflects the NFL's broader recognition that every position deserves consistency in how the game is played. The tush-push. Our analysis closes with the play that has stirred more debate than any other in recent memory. Despite months of speculation and lobbying from multiple franchises, the league's owners voted to keep the tush-push firmly in the playbook. Love it or hate it, the most polarizing play in football isn't going anywhere. The tush-push, also called the brotherly shove, is as straightforward as it is unstoppable. The quarterback lines up under center, takes the snap, and instead of relying on his own surge, he's propelled forward by teammates who physically push him across the line. What makes it so divisive isn't just its success rate, which hovers near perfection, but how it represents a clash between innovation and tradition. Some see it as brilliant exploitation of the rulebook, others see it as a play that undermines competitive balance. The positional impact is enormous. For quarterbacks, the play has elevated short yardage sneaks from a desperate gamble into a specialized skill set. Jalen Hurts is the prototype, a quarterback whose lower body strength, balance, and toughness make him nearly unstoppable when paired with Philadelphia's offensive line. That template is now more valuable than ever, nudging teams toward prioritizing mobile, powerful quarterbacks who can thrive in trench warfare. Offensive linemen, too, see their importance magnified. The success of the play hinges on timing timing, pad level, and synchronized leverage, qualities that make great lines even more valuable commodities. And for defenses, the tush-push is a nightmare that requires new wrinkles. Some teams have tried leaping over the pile or crashing gaps, but too often that approach results in penalties or exposes other vulnerabilities. Defensive coordinators are being forced to rethink how to contest the most basic situation in football: 1 yard to gain. Fantasy football hasn't been immune to its effects. Jalen Hurts has been transformed into a fantasy juggernaut in large part because of the tush-push. His rushing touchdown totals are inflated by the play's reliability, making him not just an elite quarterback, but one with a scoring edge that traditional passers simply can't match. In effect, the rule creates a clear tier break. Quarterbacks who can convert these sneaks consistently have a built-in advantage in fantasy scoring. On the flip side, running backs lose out. Those high-value goal line carries that once padded their stats are increasingly handed to quarterbacks, reducing their touchdown ceilings and subtly reshaping how fantasy managers view the position. By keeping the tush-push alive, the NFL reinforces that at its core, this game rewards those bold enough and strong enough to push the limits. Now that we know which positions hold all the cards for this season, we'll see what they make of their advantages in the coming months. Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.